Okay, I'm here with the one and only Mr. Steve Espinoza. Listen, let's get started with it, man. Can you give us an update on the Amazon new deal with PBC?
Well, we always said it was going to take some time to get up and going. You don't get into a new sport and create the whole infrastructure overnight. And, so it is gradually rolling out. We've seen the PBC page get set up, the PBC collection. You've got archive fights. You've got the shoulder programming, gloves off. And it's going to continue growing. So, this is the first step, and the library will keep growing, archive fights. There's some fantastic fights. Obviously the first wave of fights are largely the ones that are most relevant to the fights that are scheduled now. But there's some of the big fights from 2023 are up there. And a lot of the old, Zoo fights and the Thurman fights, Fedora fights. So it'll grow. But now people can at least start to see a little bit of, where the program and where the content is going.
Right. So now on Amazon Prime, the fans are going to have the replay value to where we can go back and watch the fights back on Amazon.
Right. I mean, and the other thing, and look, it's they've got a great platform. It was something that was on our roadmap at Showtime. We never quite got to, but people have always asked, okay, if I buy it at pay-per-view starts at 5 p.m. Pacific, they buy it at 6:30. Can I go back to start? Well, that's something that is now possible. So as long as you're buying it during the show, you can go all the way back to the start. So you come in 20 minutes late, you want to catch up on the 20 minutes you missed, you can do that.
So the moral to the story is just tune in when you're supposed to tune in.
Yeah, that true.
Listen, there have been debates on social media that PBC is running out of money. Can you confirm if PBC offered Canelo $55 million plus pay-per-view?
There was very, very healthy. I don't want to speak to numbers, that's put Canelo's and PBC's business in the street. But the reality there was a very, very lucrative offer. There have been multiple lucrative offers. And look, you've been around long enough. We see the narrative around these things.
Yeah.
And the narrative comes from a combination of 3 or 4 things. I mean, it comes from rumor, comes from some official information, comes from some people who are trying to spread a narrative, who've got, a chip on their shoulder, comes partially from PBC's competitors. You mix that all together, and what you get is sort of a stew of a lot of stuff which is absolutely incorrect. So, there's a lot of people, saying, well, where's the shoulder program? Shoulder programming always comes out 2 to 3 weeks before the fight. Like that has been, the structure for the last few years. So it was always coming. There's the narrative that PBC is out of money.
Right.
It's silly that they couldn't afford an escrow. That DAZN had to pay for the Canelo fight. That they rescue. I mean, the stuff is comical. I mean, a lot of it is people hoping and wishing, negativity on PBC for whatever reason. But none of it has any grounding in reality. There is a real PBC deal. There's real money involved. There are real events involved. There's marketing around the events. There's also a whole range of other distributors that are taking the PBC events.
Right.
There will be non-pay-per-view events. We're talking about a number of those, going forward. And there'll be other big events. There's a backlog of PBC fighters who are going to get fights. We all knew that going into the start of the year, that it would take a while to get this going.
Yeah.
And that at some point, relatively quickly, the floodgates are going to open, and there will be, a more steady stream of activity, and that will pick up fairly quickly.
Yeah. So PBC offered Canelo this significant amount of money. How much? And it's like, how much can PBC be running out of money according to the PBC detractors?
I mean, look, it's they've been saying PBC's running out of money. I think for 5 or 6 years. There's still you're doing big events, doing big fights. And look, PBC has a particular strategy. They don't do a lot of talking. A lot of these narratives, these rumors, just sort of grow unchecked. And they just put their head down and continue doing big events.
Listen, Canelo's trainer Eddie said that Eddie Hearn and DAZN gave him an insulting offer to fight back on DAZN. That's why Canelo came back to PBC. So why don't the PBC detractors say that DAZN is running out of money?
It's interesting. I mean, if we look at, who's active and who's going to be in the active in the U.S. and where DAZN's business and others, I mean, obviously PBC is a key part of the U.S. market. Part of the reason why it's been relatively quiet in the U.S. for the first quarter this year is because PBC has been quiet. Now, obviously, Top Rank is doing some good shows. They've got solid fighters. DAZN has done some, good shows, and they've got some events as well. But there are big events coming. Some of the biggest names in sports are with PBC, and those events will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks and months.
All right, let's switch it to Canelo, because I got some Canelo question here, or 2 or 5. No, I'm joking with you. Canelo said he doesn't fight Mexicans when he was asked about fighting David Benavidez. So how come he's fighting Munguia now?
That's a good question. But if you look back, I mean, obviously there was a rivalry for Chavez Jr. There's been a sort of rivalry even between the two families to some extent in Mexico. I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think what he was saying is, look, his preference would be to not have to fight other Mexicans, and for everyone to continue to uplift Mexican boxing. But at the end of the day, this is a business. There are opponents which create opportunities. Munguia is in the right place at the right time and is an attractive opponent. And so, look, in a perfect world, you wouldn't be fighting another Mexican. But here, I think boxing fans are the better for it, because we know some of the biggest wars in the history of boxing have been Mexican fighters against Mexican fighters. I mean, my personal favorite rivalry, Barrera Morales, is one that I think I put up against any rivalry, and those are one of the most heated rivalries, Mexican against Mexican.
I mean, under the circumstances, you can see how that it looks, though. To the public, they want to see these two guys, Benavidez and Canelo, fight. So he say, okay, I'm not going to fight a Mexican, but you fighting this one. You see the opposite.
I see. Look, and I know it's hard for people to understand, and it can be frustrating. And there's a lot that's being told, or isn't being told, that is part of the story. But again, I want to respect Canelo's business. The way he do things. I'm not going to put his business in the street, but there's a lot more to the story than just this guy's scared of this guy. I've been in boxing more than 20 years. I have yet to meet a fighter who's scared of another fighter.
Right.
It doesn't happen. Now, there's 100 other reasons why fights might not happen, and you can go through all of those. But if you look at Canelo's career, he isn't a guy who has dodged top opposition. So, I know everyone wants to see the Benavidez fight. I'm still optimistic that it can happen. I know Benavidez is hoping for it, but at the same time, David's going to continue his career and take the best fights that he can get. But I think, look, at some point, the Munguia fight looked dead. PBC with Canelo looked dead, and then things turned around. So before people start, getting, too upset and too in their feelings about, not getting Canelo Benavidez, let's just wait and see.
Right. So what's your thoughts on Mike Tyson saying that Canelo lacks heart, he's afraid to lose again, turning down the Benavidez fight?
Well, look, I know Mike's a big supporter of David Benavidez, and I think that's Mike talking as a fan, speaking very selfishly as a fan myself and other fans. I mean, we all want to see, that fight as soon as possible. So there's a lot of disappointment that we didn't get this fight. I realize that. But by the same token, I would never call a fighter's heart into question. Right. There are other things, and I'm still not. I think, look, if Canelo retires, after this fight, which never heard that he is, I don't want to start that rumor. But when he's done fighting, if he hasn't fought Benavidez, that's the time that we can start talking about not getting the Benavidez fight. Until then, we might be doing a lot of whining and crying and complaining only to see him fight in September. Who knows?
Yeah, this is getting the attention of a lot of our former champions, our former greats, like including Floyd. Floyd said he fought the Mexican monster of his time when he was 36, which was Canelo.
Yeah.
So Canelo should do the same and stop ducking Benavidez. That was coming from the champ. Now, do you think we'll see Canelo versus Benavidez fight in September this year?
Look, I wouldn't put a. I wouldn't say no to anything. You know, I wouldn't say that that's out of the question. You know, I know, you know, what's been said and what happened here, and you know, they're going their separate ways. But stranger things have happened. Right. You know, so I think, you know, people need to, if that's the fight they want, continue to express themselves, continue to support Canelo and David as they go about this, and look, we got a lot of big fights that people have been wanting for a long time last year. I think that trend's going to continue. So there's certainly other opponents, but I think, you know, Benavidez is going to continue his career. He's going to continue trying to angle for that, you know, for that Canelo fight, and you know, it very well could happen. You know, nothing's determined either way. You know, Canelo hasn't said I'm definitely fighting this guy or I'm not fighting that guy in September. You know, so you know, until he says that, then I'm going to believe that it's still possible.
Let's switch gears to two other great fighters real quick. I want to ask you, Steve, why did Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence rematch fall apart?
Well, look, Spence definitely wanted his get back. He definitely wanted another shot, and you know, and obviously, you know, Crawford, you know, being the gentleman that he is and the businessman that he is, he said, okay, you know, whether it was exactly the terms of the rematch clause or not, he was certainly willing to do it. But then, you know, there's some eye surgery, there's a recovery there, and there's a reality that it's not fair to keep Crawford waiting forever to do that. So I think it was, look, they put their heads together, tried to make it come together. Other factors came in, including the eye surgery, including some medical, you know, things, and they each, you know, decided, look, let's not hold each other up over this. Yeah. So I think it was not, again, one of those, it's like this guy was scared of that. No, it's none of that. It was, you know, they were both willing to do it, both interested in doing it. It just couldn't come together as quickly as possible. We're not sure when we're going to see Errol back. And in the meantime, it makes sense for Crawford to be free to do whatever he wants to do.
Now, Tank Davis is reportedly going to fight Frank Martin. So what's taking so long for this fight to be announced to the public? You know,
well, you know, I think we'll have that question answered sooner than later. And you know, again, we've got a network and a platform that is, you know, just coming into the sport. You know, it's not quite the same as sort of working with a Showtime where you say, okay, at the start of the year, I can tell you there's going to be 14 dates and where they're going to be roughly. You know, so it's a little bit different process of securing dates and figuring it out. You know, there's some dates out there that have been thrown out, but I think, you know, we won't be sitting here a few weeks from now without knowing exactly when and where Tank is going to fight.
What's the latest on Boots Ennis, and how come we haven't seen him in the ring this year?
You know, Boots it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up because I love to do it. You know, Boots has had a run of some of the worst possible luck possible. You know, we've known all along that it's been difficult for Boots to get fights. Mm-hmm. You know, I've never seen anything like that. And again, I'm not saying anybody's scared. It's just, you know, there's, you know, a lot of money, a little money, you know, big fights, you know, mid-level fights. It's really difficult to get him. Now, he fought last summer. We had him signed for a fight that was going to be Thanksgiving. He's going to be on the Benavidez undercard. You know, that fight was done. We were told everything is done, and the fighter pulled out. You know, the fighter accepted it. So we would have seen Boots here at that point. Now then, going forward, then we were, you know, looking at seeing him on March 30th.
Okay.
You know, originally there's going to be a Mario Barrios fight. Barrios asked for a little bit more time. We've got some things going on, and he said fine. So we moved it to the May 4th undercard.
Right.
So then he said, okay, well, he had some bad luck. Didn't see Boots at Thanksgiving, but now we're getting him, you know, which would be a great doubleheader. Now, there's another complicating factor which just came up. The IBF pops up and says, wait, slow it down. You know, let's not let's hold the phone on Boots versus Barrios, because Crowley's got something to say. So there's a negotiation there. Crowley's got a certain time frame that he's available on. There are certain rules and regulations that have to be followed for the IBF. So that put that fight on hold. So now between losing an opponent in November, agreeing on Barrios, then Barrios asking for a little bit more time, committing, then the IBF pops up. That's going to delay things further. Then we're talking about a purse bid negotiation, a potential purse bid, and it's been a series of events. And in the middle of this, you don't forget, his promoter passes away, in Cameron Duncan, which created a little bit of uncertainty as well. So if you look at all this and say, well, it's not that Boots doesn't want to fight. Anybody who's spoken to Boots knows that one thing that he likes, he fights, as often as possible. Even if it's for less money, he just wants to be active. Now, there have been obstacles which have been in the way trip, no fault of his or anybody. Nobody saw it coming that his promoter passes away. The IBF popped up out of the blue with a mandatory order. We've got a couple fights that he's got opponents which pull out. And, we're sitting there and he's going on that. Having said that, having been on phone with this team, regularly over the last week, I think we're very, very close to resolution of that. And I think we'll be seeing him, in the early summer.
Do you have to overpay Ennis's opponents to get them in the ring with him?
In general, yes. And that's been the case for a few years. It's, and I get it. He's looked pretty unbeatable. So, we got to overpay for guys to go in there. Now, not the case with Mario Barrios, and that's one thing I respect. And if you know Mario has never hesitated to fight anybody. And he never hesitated, never said, hey, I got to good overpaid if I'm going to fight Boots. Barrios stepped up and took the fight right away, which is a rarity. So that's why we were so excited. Now, I'm not saying that fight is never going to happen, right, but I think that's a fantastic matchup, and I hope we see it in the near future. But in the meantime, yes, as a rule, most people are paying, are getting paid far more than they usually get because of they're willing to fight Boots.
Did you guys send Crawford an offer to fight Jerry Ennis?
There was a lot of conversations. It's not really the way the business works. Like you don't. Everyone's like, well, it was an offer set. You don't sort of. There are people who do this, and it's not very effective. But you don't just out of the blue find a guy, send him a cold email saying, hey, you want to take this fight? No, it's a conversation. It's like, okay, what do you want to do next? Terrence, you want to do this, you want to do that, what's the plan? I got a call, and there's been so much misinformation about this. BLK calls one day, says, we want to do Crawford versus Boots. I said, okay, you got to deal with Crawford. I know what Boots' plans are, and I can make arrangements to facilitate that. So you're telling me you're bringing Crawford to the table? No, we don't actually have Crawford. I'm like, okay, well, what are you paying? You're not bringing Crawford, so you're bringing money. No, we just want the fight to happen. I'm like, all right. So basically, you're a guy off the street calling me cold and saying, I'd like to see this fight. Then I talk to Crawford. Crawford says, I don't have anything with BLK. You don't need to talk to them. If you want to make a Boots fight, talk to me. You know what? Okay, talk to you. Now, this all happened, against the backdrop of we were still in the Spence negotiation.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't really a time to be saying, okay, I'm not going to do that to Errol. Errol had given all of us specific instructions. I don't want anything other than Crawford fight. So I'm not going to go in and try to stick Boots in. We were 80% there. So it didn't even make sense to talk about Crawford. We talked to Crawford's team and said, okay, down the line we'll talk about Boots. But at that particular time, he said, no. He's like, don't worry about BLK. We're going to talk to Boots. You can facilitate, Boots. You can talk to both sides and, figure that out. So that's where that whole thing ended up. Boots didn't turn down an offer. There wasn't a BLK offer that anybody blew up. And neither did Crawford run away from an offer. It just the timing wasn't right. And he said, okay, well, why didn't you offer, boots to Crawford after that? Well, there's a rematch option, right?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
until pretty recently, everyone thought the rematch was going to happen.
Right.
So look, certainly, Crawford knows that there's a potential for the boots fight, and he's looking around. He's going to decide what he wants to do.
Well, Mr. Steven Espinoza, I'm not going to hold you up because I know we have a long day ahead of us, but I have to wrap it up with this one last question.
Okay, one last question.
Can we expect a schedule to come out for Amazon Prime?
I think so. I'm not sure that it will be one of those 6-month schedules like we used to do, sometimes at Showtime, but it will be more than one fight at a time. Like I said, as things get rolling, and it's everything from sort of the platform and the technology and building the host site and the collection page and all that. So I think as we go forward, then things are going to snowball. And then we'll get to the point where it's going to feel like the regular pace of things.
As always, man, thank you for your time.
All right, you got it, brother.